Welcome back to the Cross Up Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy, along with my co-host, Alan the Quanchito. Today we have a special guest.
Me twice. Let's
the
go.
Man, the man of the myth, the legend. I've known this guy for quite some time. Maybe like 5 or so years, maybe longer than that.
Yeah, because we were back at Gearbox.
Yeah, that's 2014. You were there after.
Yeah,
dude.
2015.
Gotcha.
At this rate, we're just going to be interviewing everyone that was ever at Gearbox. Let's go. We'll build up our whole roster. We'll have I'll put a list and we'll start crossing them off.
We'll pivot. Nice. We'll pivot. Don't worry.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Kevin Powell, aka KP. What's up?
Hey, how's it going?
Doing all right. All right. Hey. Do you want to do a little news?
It's not even a whole lot. I just thought it was. I like it because it's one of the games that I care about. So they made an announcement that Stellar Blade is coming to PC in 2025. And obviously they're not dumb. They also understand the type of game they're making. They're like, we're releasing it in 2025, and we know there's no doubt that they're going to sell more on PC than PS5.
The mods are going to go crazy.
The mods are going to go crazy, and I think it's just going to look better and play better, but we'll see.
So.
And then the first Descendant is getting 2 more characters and then I don't know if it's the next update or whenever, but they said in one of the upcoming updates they're getting 2 new characters, and because the player retention and player base is slowly dwindling, they're adding in a dedicated jiggle physics for their characters to hopefully appeal to more people, since they already have character designs and outfits that are already pretty revealing, so to speak. And it already has jiggle physics, but I guess it's going to get even crazier. I don't know. Maybe now the thigh and the calf will jiggle while they're running. I don't know.
That just sounds so weird to me, dude.
Trust me.
My stomach.
I know.
My stomach is...
Yeah, I know. But it's unfortunately that's not the first game that's done something like that, and it won't be the last.
That's fair. That's on, Chris.
I don't know. I think the game director for Marvel Rivals confirmed all the characters are going to be free or unlocked, and then the battle pass costs are going to be pretty reasonable. And I think there's one more character reveal before the game comes out.
Oh, cool.
And he's supposed to have a team up with the Hulk. So
that game comes out
nice.
December 6th.
December 6th.
Yeah.
So
today's topic is AAA versus indies. But before we really get into that, KP, tell us a little bit about your history, and then where'd you come from? Where are you going?
Oh man, yeah. How far back do we go?
As far back as you, whatever you want to share, go for it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can kind of go through my my career a little bit. So I got started in game development officially or professionally in 2010. I got in at a place called High Res Studios. When I got there, I got hired initially as a level designer. So I was working on one of their first titles was Global Agenda, and it was like a third-person shooter. It was like a very blended genre type game. It had jetpacks. You had PvP maps. You had PvE. It was trying to do a lot, but it was pretty fun to work on. And then I kind of jumped between like doing art and stuff in between that. Worked on a couple other games, Tribes Ascend, and then jumped over to Smite. Smite, I ended up doing a bunch of stuff on that. Did the first Conquest map, which if you don't know what Smite is, it's a MOBA, and it's a third-person MOBA, much like League of Legends, all that stuff. And so, I got to do the map for that, and then jumped over to doing a little bit of art, and then jumped over to actually working on the gods for the game. Smite's a mythological-based MOBA, so it's like a bunch of gods from different pantheons and stuff like that. So, I got to design a couple of gods for that.
Which ones did you design?
Let's see. I did Hu Yi. I did Ram. I did Cabraken. I did Sylvanas. Who else? Nox. Yeah, did a handful.
Oh, you
of
just
them.
identified. Okay. Because I played Smite for a little while.
Oh, nice. Cool,
Yeah.
cool. But yeah, that was a really fun game to work on. And then I ended up jumping over to Gearbox Software in 2015. So I was at Hi-Res for about 5 years. Then jumped over to Gearbox. That's where I met Jeremy and Daquan. Yeah, I ended up working on Battleborn and Borderlands 3. And I did a couple of different things, but primarily was in character design on Battleborn, and then jumped over to like systems design on Borderlands 3. So got to work on a bunch of stuff kind of in the background, and then I got to design out like a bunch of items and stuff. So all of the artifacts in Borderlands 3, like I did those, and then I got to work on like the player runes and stuff like that. And then jumped to 2020. That's when I moved out here to Austin. Ended up going. Yeah, man. And I ended up jumping over to Airship Syndicate. And they did Wayfinder, which recently just went into 1.0 release. So yeah, if you guys haven't checked it out, you should. It's real good. It's fun. I worked on it. But yeah, I got to do some really cool stuff on that. Got to design a bunch of the characters. Mainly worked on their kits and like implementing, abilities, stuff like that, weapon abilities. So yeah, I've gotten to get my hands dirty at a lot of different studios, AAA and indie. And now, well, I guess late last year in 2023, I jumped over to helping start up a new studio. So that studio is called Empty Vessel, and we're working on a new title. Yeah, we have announced it, called Defect. And yeah. So that's where I'm at right now as the design director. And yeah, we're just trying to figure out where we fit in this current industry.
Okay, I got a quick question because I've always told like other friends and stuff that if I didn't find like my career in IT or even like anything like I do now, like if I wasn't interested in that field, I always had like a really, really strong interest in like character design and things of that nature. Like I think if I didn't find computers and like networking to be like what I want to do, I'd try to be doing that. And since you started off kind of like level designing and kind of doing like that, what did you do before 2010?
College, I actually went to Savannah College of Art and Design, and I went for game development.
Okay.
At the time, they had a new sort of like game design program that they were starting up, or they had started up already. And so, yeah, I did 4 years there. And while I was there, I learned a bunch of different stuff. It was kind of like you could specialize in stuff. And so while I was there, I kind of specialized in like environment art and level design. But we kind of learned everything. So it's like I learned ZBrush and stuff, learned sculpting, learned Photoshop, any kind of editing software, just the whole suite. So like 3D packages and stuff like Maya, 3ds Max. So that's kind of where my like foundation came from. And before that, I hadn't really been into any like game development, but I was like super into computers. So like at that point, I like in high school, I had like built my own computers and stuff like that. Like I'd learned a lot just about just everything surrounding computers. And so, I was just playing the shit out of like Diablo 2 and stuff. And like, yeah, it was just a lot of just that consumed me while I was in high school. I was, a lot of just kind of burying myself in like, learning about everything I could. So, yeah.
Okay. Because I just didn't know if because like there are some people that kind of like start off either going to college or doing something else, and then they just kind of end up at a game development studio, and then that just kind of becomes the career. So I just didn't know if that's
Yeah,
what happened
yeah.
for you, or you went in there and that's like, you know, what you were trying to do already.
Yeah. It's like I after I graduated, there was a point like I was working at like the US like Census Bureau. I was like, you know, and during that time I was like working on my portfolio and stuff like that. So, you know, I was like trying to put together new levels and you know, working on my art. But yeah, it was a decent amount of time before I got that one yes, right? Like I'd applied to I don't know how many studios. And you know, either hadn't heard anything or got the like thanks but no thanks.
Yeah, pretty much.
And that is the story of most people's lives. They apply for thousands of or hundreds of game companies, and they hear a yes, a no, or a
I mean, that's just the job field in general, bro. Especially IT.
Yeah.
I think I applied to 500 to 800 jobs before I got the job that I was working with Dell, and then the job that I have now, I just stumbled upon. So I've told this story on the podcast, but that way you can know KP. I was working as just a hardware technician for Dell, so driving around to people's businesses and stuff, fixing computers and stuff like that. And I went to go fix a computer at my current where I work now. And so I fixed their computer. I was just swapping out a motherboard for like a super small, like, you know, compact computer. And then I told the owner of the company, like, all right, I'm done. Is there anything else you need before I need to head out? And he just goes, have you ever worked with network equipment like servers, access points, like router switches? I go, nope, never in my life. He goes, that's fine. I'll teach you. Do you want a job here? And so that's
nice.
And that's how I ended up just becoming a network engineer, and here we are.
Man, that's awesome.
So you either apply to a million jobs, eventually get a yes, or you get lucky. One of the two.
Yeah.
Definitely get lucky.
So KP, I didn't realize you had this many roles, because I think when you were at Gearbox, I just knew you as
systems.
Yeah. So out of all the roles that you had, which one would you say elevated your career the most?
I think the role that elevated my career the most was probably the stuff I got to do on Borderlands. It was once I got over into systems, that kind of opened up just kind of like my understanding of how things were built in the engine. And then like when you're doing systems, it's like you're touching a lot of different stuff, like a lot of different content within the editor, like having to set up these things. And so it's like learning how to kind of be the glue in between different teams, because it's like you're basically making like tools and stuff for designers, but then also you're talking with all of these other departments. So you're talking with like effects, you're talking with animation, to get all this content to work together. So it's like, working on like mission stuff for Borderlands is like a different role than working on, like level stuff, obviously. But being like the systems design in between that, where you're like, okay, I'm going to set up this actor that fires off this animation whenever the player like interacts with it, and it has to replicate, so everybody has to see the same thing at the same time. Learning about that and understanding it, like, just kind of elevates what you're able to do in the engine. And so being able to just be in that environment and learn all of that stuff, I feel like definitely like put my trajectory like upwards a lot. Yeah. So yeah, I think that was probably the role that did it for me.
For sure. Like I think I told you this, but like one of the reasons for this podcast is to like bridge the gap between us devs and the consumer, so that the consumer understands like these games aren't easy to make.
Yeah.
They take time.
Yep.
You have to be patient. It may not be what you want it to be, and but at the same time, these people, we are also human beings.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's like that's the main thing too, is like being able to execute on certain things to fulfill that like player fantasy, right? Like it's not easy, and like everybody, there's like so many different ways to do it too. based on like, you know, who's on your team, like the type of knowledge you have across your team. So it's insane that like games ship with like so many working parts, right? But you know, it's when it does, and you know, it works and it's fun. You know, everybody wins, right? So yeah. It's cool that you're highlighting that too, because like you said, it's not easy.
No. Cool. Quan, Chris, you got anything? Any questions you want to tackle, or?
No, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, I think it's unfortunate that a lot of consumers, and this is like in every field, so not just video games, but even something as low as like working at a grocery store. So consumers oftentimes confuse just how much input and like decision making the lowest level of an employee has over the company. You know, like, so like it sucks that if we go on Twitter, you can talk to a dev or like say whatever you want to a dev, but you're not going to be able to reach out to a CEO because they're just not going to be on there, even though they're the ones making those decisions or at least have a bigger hand in it. The first person that you're going to encounter is going to be a dev. And unfortunately, a lot of people are like, oh, well, this is the guy that makes all the decisions, or this is the girl that makes all the decisions. And it's like, no, it's not even close to that. And it just sucks that it's hard to educate people on that.
Yeah,
that's all. That's the thing I was thinking.
Yeah, I've also kind of touched on this. Like, I always get like nervous when like devs respond to people on Twitter,
Yes.
or just any social media in general.
Yeah,
because they're not really trained for that.
Yeah.
And like I said, unless like a Ed Boon or Harada or Todd Howe or anyone like that, I would just huh?
No, I didn't say anything.
Yeah, of course. I would just avoid responding to people on Twitter.
Yeah, I don't even respond to people on Twitter as a normal person.
Yeah, but it also sucks because I can understand being so proud of the work that you did on a particular title, and you know, why wouldn't you want to talk about that? Like, you spent months, maybe even years working on it, and I would want to talk about something that I was proud of. And the unfortunate part is, like, you're never going to please everyone. There's always going to be somebody that doesn't agree with your decision that you made, and you just voicing your opinion of like, hey, I think I did a really good job, you're going to get shit on immediately on Twitter.
Right. Only one thing I'll put about this, though, there is also the idea of you're in the games industry, so you're here to make a product for somebody else. So you also have to like read the crowd. So like if you think you did good and pretty much the world is saying your game is trash, maybe don't go online saying like, but I'm amazing, like look what I did.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm just thinking of the Concord situation. I know people are proud, but like, you know, celebrate with your team, kind of keep it to yourself. But in some circumstances, you gotta, you know, read the room. But I don't know.
Most people don't understand that.
No, not at all.
Cool. Let's move on.
Oh yeah, studio size.
Oh yeah.
We're doing studio size as in just the basis of studio size. We're separating it from cost because then we got cost on here too. So we're gonna.
I mean, but I think both of those can go hand in hand. So however you want to start it, that's fine. I just put rough bullet points on here.
I got you. Yeah. Okay, so directly the first question for you, KP, as far as working in both environments, what is your preference when it comes down to the size of the studio you're working with?
I think my preference would have to be indie. Indie team sizes tend to be a lot smaller than AAA team sizes. You know, and we have like solo devs and stuff like that as well. I think with indie team sizes, for an example, let's just throw out around 50, right? I think around 50 people. I think beyond that, I think there starts to become a problem with just how efficient teams can be when working on something, and especially like the lines of communication between teams. The more red tape there is, like the longer it takes to make decisions and kind of like, steer that boat, right? So it's like the bigger the boat, the longer it's going to take to redirect.
Why do you think that is?
It's just there's so many factors that you have to take into consideration between like interdepartmental communications. You have to consider office politics at that point too, because everybody is different, but we're all collaborating, right? So it's like, and that comes down to hiring and like how people communicate and everything too. So once you factor in all of these like differences and everything, there's just like a lot of things that can go wrong in between these sort of in between communicating with these teams. So it's like, to give an example, if you need to, let's say, deliver some kind of system, or like, let's say, for example, we're talking about like a Borderlands like mission actor. So it's like, let's say we need to change this actor that we're doing for this mission. Instead of it being a toilet that like explodes, like now it's a toilet that like goes through like some weird portal or something like that. And so that conversation has to happen like at the very beginning, when like the content, like before the content is getting made, right? Because you have to, you're affecting like effects, you're affecting potentially animation if they have to animate anything on the toilet. There's a lot of things that go into making sure this toilet explodes correctly, or that that it does what it needs to do. And so all these teams have to communicate together to make sure that like they're able to make their part of content. And so when you have issues that come up where it's like someone just has a demand where they're like, okay, well this can't work this way, it needs to go this way, that interrupts production. And so now, in order to change this toilet from one that explodes to one that goes through like a portal and does this weird thing, you have to get all these teams to like reroute what they're doing. You have to find the resources for it. And so that's just like a production issue that just props up because there's like more people involved. And so with smaller teams, it's a lot easier to like go over to the person that's like making a lot of this stuff and be like, hey, like we're working on this stuff. This is like the direction we think it's going in. It's a lot easier to kind of do that when there's smaller teams. The larger the team gets, it's a lot harder to do that type of stuff. So let's say the reason why we needed to change this is because it's like a game-breaking issue with this thing, right? So it's like now it's something that's like you absolutely have to do. It's not because of the opinion, but it's like this isn't fun. So now it's not an issue of like someone's opinion, like they just kind of want to direct this thing. It's like it's directly affecting the game and the player experience. So that I feel like just kind of exacerbates the issue when you have more people. And so I think that it can work, but I think it's a lot faster to pivot and be able to find and fix issues, and then also being able to find the fun, being able to rapidly prototype stuff. I think it's a lot easier to do that in a smaller studio than a bigger one.
I definitely get that. I think my perception, I've only worked at 2 big studios, Gearbox and id, and so I've only known people in the office, like more than 150 people in the office at any given time.
Right.
And I can definitely get why the indie size is much better. You can get past all that red tape. Like in studio with more than like 100 people, you can definitely get lost in the sauce real quick. No, no doubt about it.
I mean, you can even think about it as just like a simple office setup. Because I've worked in offices with like, we've had like 200-300 people in the office, and even trying to have just like a simple discussion with someone on like another department, you have to go to the person who's in charge of you, and then depending on how the office is set up or how they handle leadership, right? Because you have leadership for smaller sections, and then they have like leadership for like the IT department or whatever the case may be. So then they have to go to their superior, and then that superior has to then go to the other department, call them, email them, and then they have to then go down their chain to whoever I was trying to reach, hoping that my message hasn't changed in translation, and then wait for that response to go all the way through. Like nowadays, obviously it's a little bit nicer because in certain circumstances, assuming how your business is set up, right? Because even in an office setting, you have things like Teams and things of that nature, or email, where you can reach out directly. But again, depending on the type of question or the situation that has to be done, they can answer you, but they can't make the decision themselves. So it's just like even that one simple interaction has to then happen, and especially in like game development, has to happen 5-6 times.
Yep, because it's like every team, is going to have a producer, and so if you need to change anything, that needs to go to the producer. The producer is going to get in contact with the lead. Then the lead is going to have to, get in contact with all the other leads that that stuff is going to touch their teams, and you can see how that easily becomes like all of these meetings that need to happen, and it's like they're already in meetings like all day. So it's like how do you get the work done if everybody's having to be in meetings to like make these decisions and stuff. So it gets like hairy, I think, real quick. If you don't like if you so like I think the other big part of that is that's part of the pipeline, right? So like all of your pipelines and processes have to change depending on the size of the company and the size of the teams.
Gotcha.
Real quick, I don't know if like it's taboo to answer or not, but like as far as just like work culture, is there a big difference, or is it about the same regardless of the size of the studio?
I'm gonna say it's a big difference. I think it's a really big difference, and that was one of the things I was gonna bring up about studio size. The larger those studios, like automatically, you're inviting politics. You're inviting very specific ways it has to operate. It's very easy for somebody in a larger studio to feel like they have to suck up to people, or they have to hold their tongues or do certain things because you feel so small to begin with. Like that, let's say the average AAA studio now is probably like 400 deep, right? It's very difficult for like a entry level concept artist or general systems engineer. It's very difficult for that person to feel like they have a voice, or like they feel their worth day to day. So they're going to tiptoe and do everything they're supposed to do. Then they're going to try to push boundaries. They're not really living in their career at that point. They're kind of just existing and doing what they're told to do. Whereas in indie space, every individual matters. Like everybody's an important component. Like if somebody takes off, like there's like, oh, Jason's gone. Man, we kind of miss Jason. Jason is gone.
I think it's then it just basically it basically is the same thing as like, again, if you've worked in an office where you're like in a small office versus a big company, it's the exact same thing. Because on top of inviting politics and the way like you explained it that things have to run, I mean, because it's such a massive people, like let's be honest, if it's 2, 3, 4, 500 people in your office or building, you're not going to know everyone. You're not going to be friends with everyone. No. So you're going to have your group, and then that's how cliques kind of become, and then that becomes a whole thing just even socially in the office. And that's why like while even though I could be making more money if I go to a bigger company, I'm at the company that I am because in office there's only like 12, 13, 14 of us. And all of the equipment that has to be tested and sent out goes through me. And so it's like, if I'm not there, they're like, damn, all right, well, we're kind of fucked. Now my operations manager has to do my job. And it's like really important, and it makes it way more fulfilling to be in this smaller company than if I were to go make almost double my salary, but I'm working in a random ass company where my work may or may not even be noticed that day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Pretty
it's a big studio culture thing too, because I think that there are ways to have that amount of people, but still have your employees have agency over the things that they're working on. Because I feel like that's another thing is like I feel like you also get like the best work when you're working on things that interest you, right? Like
Right.
you're gonna do your best work when it's like, oh yeah, I really like working on this thing. And so being able to understand that from like a personnel point of view, right? Of like, okay, like I know Daquan like really likes these type of problems to work on or these systems, and so I'm gonna put him on that. I feel like there has to be that level of attention to your team, right? But like some studios do that way better than others, and so yeah, I think it's a big just company and studio culture thing on top of that. But yeah, you see it a lot more in indie, just because everyone is so important, right? Like the less people you have, the more they have to cover,
Right.
and so it's I just feel like it allows people to shine like a lot more.
So in indies, you definitely wear many different hats in the indies compared to like a big AAA studio.
As long as you
And-
feel appreciated for it, I guess that's
Right.
good, right?
Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Like for these big companies, you have to put the people in the right situation in order for them to succeed.
Mhm.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Yep.
Uh, So you want to put? I'm gonna put costs. Yeah, like the Quan said, cost of studio size is kind of go one in the hand, right?
Almost, because I also thought about that because we got publishing and like sprints and stuff in there. I think cost is going to be still a separate conversation because it depends on how you look at the word cost. So I think we can still break that up.
I mean, I guess we can just talk about that now. Just go into costs and how it's different.
Yeah. So the biggest thing is like there is. Okay, obviously making the video game is like a creative process, but as Alan has pointed out, like there's still those references to like the non-video game realm of what it takes to do certain things as a large entity. Whenever someone looks at a game and it says like, "Oh, this game costs like $200 million or $100 million to make," and this, that, and other, that term is honestly it's very disingenuous for what it meant, how much that thing actually costs. When it comes down to AAA, you're going to be thinking about like what are benefits people are requesting, how much is this office space, what are the extra taxation because the company is as large as it is, are they actually getting any breaks? You're looking at how much they're going to be spending to like send people around the world. What are they spending for? Like there is all the operating costs outside of just like what did we pay somebody to like exist in this company. And then there's also the cost of saying like, okay, well, how many people are actually working on like each of these things? Because you can, I think over at Activision they call it person months, but there's varies per company. But when you think about like what a cost actually means, that varies per the studio. So like one person month for a bigger studio can be worth like 5 for like a smaller studio because of like what type of actual work and the quantity of folks are involved in that one little grouping. So the costs whenever you try to like compare indie and AAA, like there is like no comparison between what is actually being spent. Like KP mentioned with the red tape. that money that is spent during the red tape, because like each conversation still has a cost too. If you have like KP being here, if we were all at a studio and wanted KP in this conversation, it is a very expensive conversation. Like we're all expensive. And it's funny because most people would think about that, like, oh, a guy is in here, like, why is that expensive? Well, how much is this person paid? How much influence does this person have on other systems? If you want this one person here, like, dear God, like this person can be cutting tape over there, they can be handling this, they can be making these decisions, but instead you got them right here. And like in the indie space, like KP mentioned, you can just go over to Brad and be like, hey, Brad, we need this fixed. And that was like a 10-minute conversation. Like, yeah, man, I'll kick you an email on exactly what I was talking about. So like the efficiency versus the actual value of what you're getting out of each situation in general for indie is just nothing compared to the AAA debacle. So it's very difficult when I hear the word cost with both of these because I'm like they're just two different realms of stuff. just yeah, it's always funny. Just like for the we had that conversation about what is it? Game journalism, or I made the statement that indies in AAA should be judged differently. Like when someone says, "Oh, well, Subnautica was a great game. It's game of the year." It's like, no, it's indie game of the year. Like it cannot be compared to something like Call of Duty or Smite or League of Legends. Like they're two different work environments. Like you can't compare these products. But yeah, that's just my thing on cost.
Yeah.
That's all
What
I'm
are your,
saying.
what are
That's
your
all I'm
thoughts on
saying.
that, KP?
I agree to an extent. Only because it's like there's just so much that goes into what that cost means,
Yeah.
and also like who you're talking to about that cost too, right? Because it's
Mm.
like the owner of that studio is going to be thinking about it in a completely different way,
Yeah.
and so it's trying to bridge the I guess the mind gap of like trying to think about like all of these operating costs and stuff. And so right off the bat, like, yeah, the AAA space is like just thinking about the cost for like upkeeping like a building, right? Like you
Mm.
have to like actually have a studio, have a space. And so there's a lot of things, especially now, well, since 2020, right? It's like
Mm.
when we all, went full remote, and it was just like, oh yeah, we could actually do this like fully remote. We don't need an actual studio to go back to
Yep.
be able to ship a game. And so it's like right there, it's like, man, you mean we don't have to keep a massive building and like fill it with snacks and stuff. We have to pay staff to come through and like clean. We there's all of these operating costs that you could just cut right there. But then also thinking about like where is that money going when you talk about these massive budgets for these games and stuff like that, because it's like there are things going to building up, keeping everything, but then like you were talking about like people months or people
Yeah.
days, where it's like okay, that goes to like the burn rate for your studio, like on your staff, just to exist, right? Like you're paying
Mhm.
your people, and then you have to think about on top of that, it's like outsourcing, because outsourcing is another big
Yep.
thing,
Yeah,
and it's like
it's getting bigger too.
yeah,
Yep.
I mean, the industry right now is changing a lot. I'll just say that. But regarding like outsourcing and stuff too, it's just like thinking about like how salaries have ballooned in the U.S. and now there's like outsourcing houses in Europe, where it's like people are hiring artists for a fraction of the cost that are delivering the same amount of quality. Like so, there's just like all kinds of stuff going on. So it's like it's kind of hard to even talk about these like budgets right now because it's like actively changing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's just kind of interesting to be in that space now, or be thinking about it now, because yeah, there's just so many different factors that go into that. But yeah, I agree that, like, yeah, indie costs are definitely on a lower level than AAA costs. But I think the AAA costs in general have ballooned like so far out of proportion to like the work that's being done. And so it's like I feel like you're starting to see that like across the board, like a lot of these like large studios. I mean, of course, with all of these layoffs and stuff like that, it's super unfortunate. And so we're seeing like basically all of these studios like imploding and stuff like that, because they're getting rid of a lot of people that were core to these like projects, right? And so it's like now there's less like tribal knowledge within the studio. So it's like the people that even built the stuff aren't there. And so yeah, sorry,
And
I kind of went off on a
documentation
tangent.
No.
Yeah, I went off on a tangent, but yeah, the cost, I think we're gonna see some interesting stuff in the AAA space as far as cost is concerned. But then yeah, the indie space is changing a lot too. We're seeing a lot more solo devs, and so it's like I could imagine that there's going to be a lot more solo dev projects popping up that are being published by some of these like maybe larger publishers and stuff like that. Same thing with the indie space. I think we're going to start to see a lot more like the sort of smaller teams, being supported, just because it's like the access to these engines and stuff like that, and then also assets and stuff are a lot
There's lower
easier.
risk for the publisher.
So it's like being able to like build something is going to be a lot easier, but building something that like lasts or grabs the attention of a certain like target audience, that's going to be the difference maker. Is like how unique can you make your game.
So,
But yeah.
Wait, real quick,
okay, go ahead.
before we move on. So I've heard both of you talk about this, and I was kind of curious, how much does your like average dev know about the money that's being spent at the company at like any given time? Because like when you guys talk about it, you talk about it with such like in-depth knowledge of it all. I'm curious, is that the norm, or is that the outlier?
It's not the
Okay.
norm.
That is
All right,
definitely
I was
not
just
the
curious.
norm.
Like,
Yeah,
Nah,
it's not the norm.
Yeah, you want to explain it, KP? You want me to go ahead?
I mean, you could start off, but yeah, it's like I won't say too much on it, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just curious because like you guys talk about it, and I'm just like, oh man,
Yeah.
they like, how aware are they like just an everyday worker versus like, are you guys just an outlier in that situation?
So because I am like removed from MIDI company at the moment,
Mhm.
and KP, I don't know if I told you, but I was the at Activision for a bit. I was the operations producer for Raven, handling their costing and whatnot. But pretty much the average developer should know nothing about this process, because like it's its own thing. So like this is more for, and honestly, depending on the studio, your primary producer per your team, your different directors, your management, if you decide to, switch that up from them having that, double role or different roles, whatever it's going to be. And then whoever your like most senior staff, they should understand the basics of like, however you define your people when you're doing your costing, only those people should get it, because it's primarily people management. And each team is going to figure out what that looks like. But again, that is only going to be the folks who actually sit down and say like, hey, we got 5 guys doing this and you need one of them, so we're going to bargain because in 3 months we need this other thing going down. Those conversations are very specific to the people that need to make those decisions. So the average developer should just know like, hey lead, I don't have time to do that because you already told me this and I got this going on. So they just need to talk to their lead, and then that gets handled later on. So It's like the same thing as if you're working at a Walmart or something, right? Like the supervisors are going to handle your schedule and stuff. You just got to let them know like what you have going on. So
Gotcha.
Yeah, and for me, just within the past year, because it's like I've been at Empty Vessel for a little over a year now. But being a director at a a indie studio, being part of like the founders for that studio is I've learned a lot on the business side. And so, so I've been, basically within the last year, kind of exposed to this stuff with, like, okay, how much do we have? Like, how long until we, run out of money, right? Like, and it's just like, and you'll probably see a lot of like indie devs, especially online, when talking about like fundraising and stuff like that. It's just like it's a very different, like, it's a different environment to be in, and then especially like kind of being privy to that information, it changes your decision making and stuff like that, but like largely it's just kind of like understanding like, oh, okay, I kind of understand why these decisions were made in the way they were made, but then I'm also kind of like side eyeing some stuff that happened,
exactly
right? And I'm just like, So it's just like seeing that stuff and then understanding it, and then especially for us at Empty Vessel trying to operate differently from that, because it's like we've been in dev environments before, and like there's definitely, I know I have like stuff that I didn't like about the environments I was in. And so it's like trying to change change that about our studio and how we, communicate and all of that stuff. Because, I feel like it does make a difference. And so, trying to actively change things about the industry that you don't like, while, still trying to maintain like, this is obviously a business, and, we're trying to make a product. And it's like, but, also it's the art of it too. It's like,
Right.
So there's a lot to it, but being exposed to those numbers and stuff is not like a common thing for devs to know. But I think it should be exposed a little more to devs, just because I think that in the past, being parts of these like incentive programs and royalty programs and stuff like that, like it's all very obscured, I feel, and I think it would be nice for devs to know like, okay, this is how much money we're generating for this company, and like knowing like, okay, I'm getting a certain amount of it, and I feel like knowing what I know now, I feel like there's a lot of devs that have probably been not justly what's the word I'm looking for,
Compensated?
Compensation. So like that so that's my thing is like, especially for like how big games have gotten over the years, right? And just purely looking at the numbers and how much money these games generate. And then you look at like the workforce and how the workforce has been treated the last like couple of years, especially, it don't add up. Like, and
No,
so
it doesn't.
it's something that I feel like, definitely needs to be exposed more.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
So before we move on, I my quick question for KP. Like, we harp on Concord a lot, and I get it. But the reports were like the game cost what, almost 400 something million or something like that.
Like public number 430 million or some shit.
Yeah.
Understatement.
What are your thoughts on that, KP? You think that's over or under of what the game actually costs?
I think that's over what it costs. That seems like a bit much for that game. And I mean, like looking at the quality of it, because I mean, it's like animations, the character art, all of that stuff, like it's very high quality. But like, you know, unfortunately they didn't hit with their target audience. But like knowing that, you know, like, and I have friends that, you know, worked on that, and it's unfortunate how it was received, but I feel that like, yeah, as far as like the budget for it, I think that number is probably a little over what it actually costs to make that game. But you know, when you look at like the different studios and like how many of these studios got purchased over the past couple of years, like all of that stuff, you know, those numbers get blurred, you know, when you take into account like, okay, that I think that studio got purchased by Sony,
Yeah,
right, and everything. And so yeah, there was, I feel like there's a lot of like numbers that could have been skewed throughout that purchase and everything too. So yeah, it's hard to tell until you see like an actual document or like official you know, numbers get put out. But yeah, I think that number seems a little high to me.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the coin.
Now for me, I'm on the other end. I'm actually interested, KP. So maybe we can chat about that later. Because I'm interested because I'm looking like,
yeah,
I did some digging, so I was just I got some thoughts. I got some thoughts, but
I was about to say, because I think because obviously we haven't spoken about it publicly, but Jaquan's been hinting that it's quite a bit more was spent on it.
Yeah, the way I was going to look at like their personnel, I was looking at how much they had before the purchase, like the amount of time, and then I was also looking at the average amount of money that Sony was spending for like outsourcing on some of their other games. I was like, I don't know. I don't know about this one, but I don't know. Maybe it is less because, like you mentioned, for the fact of like with that purchase in general, how much that was actually like brought into that number. So like I don't know, but I don't know. I'm keeping the eyes open on the costs on that one. But yeah, I would pray that it's not that high for the fact of Star Citizen costing like 700 million. I can't compare that game to Star Citizen.
What's Star Citizen?
Like
yeah.
Star Citizen, I think they reached $700 million.
Something like that.
I think they reached 700 million. Yeah. And also the reported number.
They've done a lot of fundraising, right? Like
I think a big chunk of that is all from like people like not like buying ships, which is essentially like a donation. Like they understand it's like this is way overpriced for an in-game item, but they're like supporting the game's development. So it's just like, you know, a lot of that money comes from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's like, you know, they find a really interesting model to put out to their players that their players accept, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I feel like we're probably going to see more of that in the future, especially with just how the way things are going with like, especially monetization and how like, I feel like there's players that are getting tired of you know, battle passes and stuff like that. So it's like, what's going to be the next thing, you know, that allows, you know, studios to stay afloat and create content. Yeah. Going to be interesting.
Yeah. Cool. Let's chat a little bit about publishing. Obviously there's a difference between indie and AAA. Like for AAA studios, we have like 2K, EA, Ubisoft. That's the big three I can think of off the top of my head right now. And then indies, it could go either way, really. You can self-publish, or you could pitch your game to, you know, one of the big publishing companies and then publish a game that way. How can I phrase this?
What are you trying to ask?
Which process is better for either for indie?
For indie, so better like over going through a publishing source or doing it yourself.
Yeah,
I would always assume
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at that point.
I mean, would it not be better in the long run to do it yourself, learn the process, and then save the middleman altogether? I mean, unless you just ultimately fail, I don't know, because I've never been through it, so I don't know.
I feel like it's preference, right? Like I think depends on what you're trying to achieve. Because I mean, the amount of knowledge you have, obviously, like I would think if KP decided like he was going to make his own game, he would be more suited to go find a publisher or make the decision to like he has the option to kind of do either or because the amount of knowledge and like stuff you've already gotten to like have the option for both. But if you're like a high school student and you decided to make like that game only up, I don't know if you should be dealing with the publisher. Like
Right.
but again, it's still preference. So I don't know that question's a bit. You can't really definitively say.
Which, yeah, I get that.
It's just
Yeah, I think it also it depends on what the publisher is looking for too, right? Because the publisher is always going to be looking to fill out their catalog of games that they're publishing. And so I can speak a little bit on this because we're currently going through that process of pitching, right? So we're pitching to different publishers and stuff like that, and looking for fundraising and everything. And so being exposed to all of that has been super interesting. And so I'd say for indie looking for funding or looking for publisher, there's a number of factors that go into it. And so I think like a publisher is very good for a number of reasons because it's like, they have those they already have the contacts for everything that you need to do to ship your game. They have the connections for advertising, all that stuff. They also already have, metrics for, certain target audiences. So whatever genre your game is in that you're trying to pitch, like they probably have similar games in their portfolio. And so they already know that they can tap into, these similar markets to advertise your game, stuff like that. So I think that like going with a publisher is huge for really any developer. But having the right publisher, I think, is also a factor. Because it's like, you don't want to go to a publisher that, publishes primarily, phone games if you want to do like big AAA, like single player games, right? Like they're probably not going to be the right publisher for you. But I think that making sure that you approach the publishers that are going to resonate the most with like your project, I think is a smart move. And then also understanding how to tailor that pitch towards these publishers or whoever you're pitching to that you want to potentially fund your game. So like understanding understanding the market that you're trying to enter, understanding the players of that genre, all of that stuff, I think is a major factor in the dev publisher relationship. Yeah.
Like one of the things that me and Daquan, I think we also mentioned it on the podcast, is like Larian Studios self-published Baldur's Gate 3 compared to Gearbox and 2K publishing Borderlands 3. Larian, that's an indie game. Most people will say it's AAA, but it's an indie game.
It's an indie game.
Actually, I found out, if I'm correct, Tencent owns like 30% or something of Larian.
Oh,
Only
yeah.
30%.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I was like, well.
Does that change it? Does that change it now?
I mean, in the reality,
they don't own half the company, right?
Not half, but I mean, it's still Tencent, and they can still say, "Hey, this is one of our." I can't even remember the word for it right now. This is one of our other entities within our, our little portfolio. So, like, if they need help, hey, Epic, go help those guys out. So now, they've saved resource and time someplace, and like, I don't know if they can be called indie at this point because I mean,
This might be a little gray area. Though.
like it's a gray area, so I don't know. I don't know, but maybe.
Mhm.
I
So
was
is it?
disappointed
I,
when I
I have a
found that out. I
question.
was like, damn.
Sorry, real quick. More on this. What's the difference between, like, obviously I know like the intrinsic difference, but like you have what are called angel investors, right? That they just kind of like invest and then are very hands off. If that's the case with the 30% of Tencent, would you still consider it an angel investor, or is it just because that company has that reputation? Would you not consider it that at all?
I don't know if Tencent can do an angel investment because once you're an entity like Tencent, like that's like a whole acquisition type of situation. Like I don't know if you can't. Like I don't know, KP,
So
if if you could.
is it like a legal definition?
I don't think they can. Like that just doesn't sound right. Like
Yeah, it depends on the deal that they struck, right? And we're not gonna know that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
There's no way we'd find out. Okay, yeah, just curious.
But to the thought of if you are a company that has all your hooks and other things, and a studio like Larian is teeing up to have their biggest project ever, and you know their success is going to reflect your income at some point. I, just saying, as a smart business move with enough resources, I would make it to where, hey, what do you need? So but again, as KP said, we have no idea what the deal was, so I don't know. But
I mean, we just know that like since they supported them, financially, I imagine they would have a vested interest in making sure that any projects that they put out are successful, right? So
pretty much. They're protecting their assets. That's what protecting assets. But but I don't know. Maybe we can still call them indie. Maybe. But just
What about Transistor? Aren't they? What's that company called? The people who made Hades.
Supergiant.
Supergiant.
Are they self-published?
I think so. I'm pretty sure they are.
I think they self-publish all of their games. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I can't remember if they did get a deal for Epic to make Hades an exclusive for a while, but even then, like they would still be. I think that's
still indie.
Like
a publishing deal for like shipping, like exclusivity. That's still, you can still be indie and take that deal.
Still get that deal.
Yeah. I think the major thing is like a publisher. They basically fund the project throughout, like basically to completion. And the difference between like an angel investor and a publisher is that like you're able to utilize all of those resources from the publisher. Angel investor is usually more hands off, and they don't necessarily affect the project in the way that a publisher would, because the publisher is just focusing on the project. Angel investor is more focused on the company as a whole. And so, like I would imagine that if Larian were trying to, do some other things aside from game dev, then, that's where Tencent would come in. Like they would be like, hey, well, we, own a certain percentage, so we have a certain say in how the company operates, right? So,
Cool. So I really hear dev cycles. I don't know. Like I just started writing bullet points just for no reason.
I mean,
I think we kind of touched it a little bit when we first started talking about like the sizing difference and like the changes that you would want to make, right? Or did you want to go more in depth into like what exactly it entails?
What are you gonna say, the point?
well, I was about to say, like, again, almost in the same thing as costing, you can really kind of go into the weeds with like dev cycles because it is different per studio, per setup. And I see we have like sprints here. I think overall this section is like production and actual like production cycles, like product cycles. So I think I'll be honest, I've helped out on some indie stuff, and I've helped out. Well, I mean, obviously, I've worked at the AAA studios too, but like, I feel, and I don't know about KP and Jeremy here. I feel like I was spoiled at Gearbox for how well that production team handled everything. But ever since I left, I was like, I don't think I have found a.
I know what you're saying, and I get it. I like the clients that I've worked with. Does not come close to Gearbox's production.
No, I just.
I've seen some shit that I just can't understand.
Yeah, I think I'll harp on basically. It depends from studio to studio. Like your production and your pipelines are going to be different. Office culture or studio culture is also going to affect that. And yeah, there's just a lot that goes into that. But like at a studio's core, like those pipelines and processes are whatever the core team builds that up, and that's going to be a huge thing in every studio. And so it just depends on who's helping build out those pipelines and those processes. It can be real nice and work like super smoothly, or you can get hiccups everywhere just because of how it's set up. But yeah, it's just always going to come down to that like studio culture and how they handle communication.
Like one thing I noticed recently, working on other other projects, is production and their obsession with time estimates on tasks. I don't know why, but like the time at like a Gearbox, and I've either I just haven't heard it, or anyone talk about time estimates in Jira tasks at all. And then like years later, now everybody wants time estimates. And for like an audio person, how much time? I'm like right now I'm trying to figure out how much time you want me to put in here. We're just like doing concepting, which can take weeks sometimes. Like how much time do you actually want me to put on here so that it makes sense for production? So when we get to like full production, like the time makes sense.
I think to KP's point about like the cost of stuff ballooning, that's also why time estimates have become very under the microscope. Because I'm trying to frame this without. Let me see. Gotta think about this before I say it. Let me make sure I'm not gonna get sued for saying some weird stuff. Well, I was at Activision or at Raven. So like the reason they hired me on was I don't know what toolings that you've used for like production or for any type of costing. But we used something that was close to Monday. I can't remember like what it was called. It's called Float. We use Float. And when I got there, it was like, yeah, so Float is what we're going to use, but we're trying to find a more efficient way to do this. Without saying the number, the way, as KP mentioned, however those core people decide this is how it's going to run, it can be the difference between, and I'm going to exaggerate this number. I repeat, I'm exaggerating numbers for some random scenario, right? It can be the difference of you not knowing you're wasting like $10,000 in resources and like $1 million in resources. So it's like, if you don't really like settle in and figure out like what are your actual like burn rates, or what are your proper turnarounds per sprints, and where your extra resources need to be shifted. Like, hey, we have a team of 50 and they're working on this, but like a third of the team finished like 6 days early. Okay, shift them to the next thing. If you're not properly like setting that up and getting those estimates and consistently updating your process, you make some nasty mistakes that you will pay for later. So I get it. It's a bit annoying because just like Chris mentioned, like how much should the person, the average person really understand that type of information? I agree with KP. I think more people need to honestly understand what their time is worth
Yeah.
and why certain exercises are repeated throughout the month. Because if everybody's not on board, it just makes that process a lot more difficult. And then pretty much everybody suffers, especially it's like, oh, we can't really get bonuses because, we didn't hit a certain widget because we found out we were like over budget or we bled too much, during this time frame or whatever. So I and again, might be talking about like production mindset, but I am highly in the mind timelines, sprints, pre-production, like all the planning, all that has to be on point. Like it just you got to, and that's indie or AAA. It's actually, and this is just my fault for what KP said about like in indie, you are definitely eyeballing your resources because it's all you got. I honestly feel like in indie production and like doing this cycle and like sprint and planning, it's even more important because you have less leeway.
Right.
So that's yeah. But correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know.
No, that's spot on. I feel like it's definitely important. And it's funny you said you were exaggerating those numbers, but those numbers can be real. And like just to give a like an example or a scenario where that could happen is like let's say you're working on a project, you need to make like a vehicle, right? This vehicle is going to be pilotable. And you go through your whole process and your pipeline of like, okay, it needs to get concepted out. It needs to, go through a whole approval process for that. Then it needs to get modeled, rigged up. So, animation is involved. Then it needs to get in the game. So you have design time, whoever's implementing it, getting it in the game. And then it's like, oh shit, well, the artist that's, working on it, like it takes, them however long they need to work on it. This could be months, depending on the fidelity of the asset. And then, it's like, okay, well, if there's any part of this process, like let's say, the art director was out and they weren't able to, put notes on, things that needed to change for the vehicle. And then there was like a major, gameplay change. And now it's like this vehicle, needs to be remodeled to support, 2 people being able to get into it now instead of just one. And so it's like, okay, considering the cost of all these people within this process and like how much it's gonna, require rework and everything, that costs can easily go up into the millions. And so it's like that's why processes and pipelines are so important, because it's like you avoid this stuff the more prepared you are. And so it just and that's going to come down to expertise and how much have you done this before, all
pretty
of that
much
stuff. So
and honesty, that's the other part, because that's the crazy thing. Folks being honest about how long something should take. It's like, bruh, if you know you need more time, say you need more time. Like, stop playing around. Just say you need more time.
Yeah. Because then you end up messing up everything else, because it's like, oh, I put in too little time, and so now I need like another week, but like people were expecting this, this week,
Right?
And
everything
like,
questions.
And so if you're just dealing with 15 people, that's a lot easier. Once it gets to 200, it's like that, so that cost can really end up like it's just a waterfall effect, I feel like.
Cheeto, Chris, you got any thoughts or questions?
No, not on this.
No. I mean,
But
sorry, just real quick. I just thought of something. When you guys were talking about sprints and stuff like that, what? And we can make. I don't know if you want to make this the last topic because we're running kind of long. But do you think crunch is avoidable or is like a non-avoidable thing when it comes to game devs?
Yeah, crunch is absolutely avoidable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like all the stuff we've just been talking about. You know, your process, your pipelines, your production of that. It all plays a role into, you know, if a studio has to crunch or not. Now there's things that could happen, you know, that's kind of out of your control, but I don't think that you should ever really like require crunch. It's like, you know, delay the project. If you know you're not going to be able to deliver on these things, but don't kill your employees to, you know, just to get something out that's going to be a worse product anyway. I think that it's completely avoidable, but yeah, it's like, you know, there's always going to be people within the workforce that have different mindsets. And so, you know, that's also, I think, an issue that, you know, is going to be from studio to studio. What's your studio culture? Does your studio culture give off an air where it's like if people aren't, you know, crunching when it's like when something, you know, needs to be due, then, you know, do they feel bad about it? Like, how are you communicating? Like if a date slips or something like that, are people getting reprimanded? Like there's a lot of stuff that play into, you know, that whole thing about, you know, crunch. And so, you know, especially having done crunch before and knowing how it affects you. It's
no.
yeah, it's
For
not
your
good.
well-being, and
Yeah.
No.
And yeah, it's just like it's not feasible to always require crunch before, you know, launching a game. It's just like I think that's just, you know, an industry-wide problem as far as like, you know, making sure that there's standards you know, that are set for stuff like that. And, you know, that just comes with you know, people that are making the decisions understanding you know, what their team is capable of, and, you know, and then how long it takes and everything. So yeah, back around to time management and everything. Time estimates. It's like it's something that I feel like, especially creatives, like it, you know, just kind of butts heads, like especially because it's like you can't rush the creative process, right? Like it's like you can't rush it, but then also it's like having to think about it from like a production pipeline sort of standard, where it's like, okay, well, you know, we can't take forever to, you know, find the best sound for something, or find, you know, the best like color palette for this thing. Is like it needs to be out at this time. So trying to find that balance, I feel like, between especially the more like creative side of you know, the workforce is also a thing that I think yeah, it's just going to vary, like based on who you're talking to, like the artists you're working with, all that stuff. So
for sure.
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So this question, I'm gonna ask the coin first.
Oh
Yeah,
god.
Who should lead the industry in innovation, AAA or indie?
AAA.
Why is that?
I only say AAA because without AAA being the initial innovator, there is no standard. And I think, well, let me not say there's no standard. AAA is supposed to be the the blockbuster, like boom, this is what everybody's looking forward to. Like even if, you know, indie game 1, 2, 9, 15, whatever isn't great, we know AAA is gonna come with something. I think it's good if AAA lead it so that indies can iterate on it. But I don't think, because you think about, again, like all the costing and the different things we just talked about. AAAs can't really afford, which is funny to say out loud. They can't afford to be iterating like indies can, but they can set the standard to begin with, and then indies can iterate and iterate and iterate. AAA can look back and say like, okay, look, those 7 games did this. They were mildly successful, so like we can come back, we can really solidify this, and then like, how do we represent this in big form with all the people that we have? But yeah, I don't see AAA being iterative. More so, like they can be like innovative.
Gotcha. What
Yeah.
about you? What about you, Alan? What do you think?
I think I always considered it to be AAA just because of the like something similar to what Daquan said. I just always assumed because AAA is the leading thing and it's like some of the more popular games, it's kind of like he said sets the standard. And so you can have like, I mean, you probably could, but like, let's be real. Like, if an indie game does something that's like quote unquote super innovative, it doesn't automatically mean like a bunch of the new AAA games that are going to be coming out are going to be starting using that as a standard. Whereas, like, when a AAA game does something like that, then everyone else will start doing something similar or changing up on it, having iterations of it. So I've always considered AAA having the biggest stage to be the ones to innovate.
Gotcha. What about you, Chris? Same thing or?
Yeah, for the most part. The only thing is, I like back kind of what we were talking about earlier. I do feel like maybe sometimes, at least from an outside perspective, indies always give me the ideas that people are allowed to be a little bit more creative with what they come up with, or like what they experiment with. I think, yeah, ultimately we never hear about the stuff that never made it out of the drawing board,
Right.
but and with AAA they have a bigger budget and bigger advertising stuff, so you hear about that stuff a lot more. And I just think, like, obviously with zero basis whatsoever, but like I just feel like if you go to an indie dev, they might have like a little bit better freedom of expression and
Gotcha.
stuff like that. Yeah.
All right. I also have the same thoughts of what the Quan said. I think AAA should also lead innovation for the most part. Yeah. KP?
I guess I'm the odd one out. So I disagree. I think that indies are kind of the engine behind innovation within the industry. If we look at even just like in the past, like let's say, actually I won't put a time on it. I'll just say that if we look at like AAA as far as like the mass appeal and everything, like Daquan said, there's not a whole lot of iteration that AAA studios can do when it comes to innovation. That's where I feel like indies come in. You have so many indie games that are doing so many different ideas on such rapid iterations. Like we just see so many cool things come out of indie titles that then AAA game development can then take and make this massive hit off of, using the systems within their respective genres. And so like an example I'll give is just like kind of look at what Blizzard has done, like always, right? Like they take a concept or an idea of a game, and especially something that has been experienced before, but they polish the shit out of it. Like they create the best player experience that you possibly can.
Very
and
much.
It's like that to me is like what I feel like AAA has always kind of been about, is like, granted there's always going to be, AAA hits that kind of come out of nowhere. But I feel like being able to those are fewer and far between. But like the whole AAA, I feel like part of the industry is kind of capitalizing on the mass appeal of these like new ideas. That a lot of them that we see in indie titles. And so it's like to for an example, there was Body Cam. Yeah. So it's just like, but like, just thinking about it, it's like, I feel like eventually we're going to see, a AAA version of what that looks like. And that experience is going to be wild. Like I can imagine there's probably a studio working on something like that right now.
Yeah.
I have no idea, but it's, just kind of the nature of the industry is like, when you see like interesting stuff, it starts to get the gears turning, and it's like, oh, how can we like, elevate this, or how can we like, make this cool, and how can we do it in our way? And so that's what I feel like indie does for the industry, is like these ideas, especially in the way that they're executed and everything, end up birthing these like really cool projects just because maybe they inspired somebody. And they got inspired enough to start to work on a different project or work on something new. And so I feel like the indie space is like where a lot of that innovation ends up happening. And I think that like in the past we didn't really see a ton of that because it's like the tools weren't as accessible as they are now. And so it's like the more that these tools become accessible, especially with Unreal, you have like UEFN with like the Fortnite stuff and everything. Actually, that's another good example, is like we probably would have never gotten like Fortnite Battle Royale if DayZ, indie title that was modded. It's like we wouldn't have had it. Like, and so that's a whole thing. Like, I can imagine also Apex, right? Like, same thing. So I feel like there's like this balance between like AAA and indie as far as like, the ideas that come out of, these indie spaces, and then, they're able to find their audience and everything, but then, having that inspire the AAA space, and, seeing what like that idea taken to the extreme could be, is like something that I think, we'll keep seeing. But yeah, that's kind of my opinion on like innovation in the industry. But again, the industry is in a super weird place right now. There's a lot of stuff going on.
So I was gonna say, so my question is, well, it is like that right now. Do you think it should stay like that, or do you think like it should be the other way around, where the AAA should be the ones doing those ideas?
Sorry, real quick. This kind of going into the last question. Like, where do you see it happen? Like, where do you see the industry in like 5 years or so? Like,
okay, cool. Yeah, so what I see happening, especially right now, is like we have all of these tools being available to, just anyone, right? Like anyone can download Unreal, anyone can download Godot, anyone can download Unity, and just start making stuff. And now, like, especially with like the stuff that we're starting to see now, I think last week, Fab launched for Unreal. So it's like people can like craft like whole systems and pieces of a game, and you can like just take that and put it in your project. You could do that before with like the marketplace, but I think now it's like a lot more curated and stuff like that. But like just having access to all of that stuff and how easy it is to like just get in and like do some stuff. I think we're about to see like a crazy explosion of just like a lot of stuff getting released, and then I think it's going to take a little bit of time to be able to like filter through just like what that is, and like the quality bar and everything that players are expecting out of certain projects and stuff like that. But I think the lines are going to be blurred a lot more between like AAA and indie, and especially like with team sizes and stuff as well. Like I think we're going to see a lot more like solo devs. I think we're going to see a lot more smaller teams, or smaller team sizes. Like I think like sub 50 people, maybe even sub 30. But I think that we're about to see a pretty big shift in just like how the industry operates as far as like big box like AAA games, and then like the indie space, and like how accessible it is, and how many people are participating in like actually just making games. And I think that maybe Epic at that point might have introduced the multiverse or the metaverse. But yeah, I feel like that's also something that like Epic is just doing, and like I don't know how many people are paying attention to it, but it's like they literally are building like the metaverse. Like they have access to like so many IPs, and it's this social hub. Like they've created like a massive social hub already with just Fortnite, and so I don't know what they're gonna do, but I feel like if anybody is gonna build the metaverse, it's probably gonna be Epic.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I got one more question before we get out of here. For someone who is new, who wants to get into game dev, there's different avenues you can do. You can go the school route. You can download the engine and just learn yourself, or you can try and get a QA job at an actual studio. What advice would you give with those people? Like where would you point them first?
I would say, especially now, because it's kind of weird to not suggest going to like the college route, but I also feel that like you have so much access to the knowledge and also like assets and stuff like that, that you could, if you're interested in that, like just start reading up on it. There's so many different facets of like game development that you can get into. So figure out like where your passion lies within game development. Not saying that you have to specialize, because I think that generalist skill sets are also going to be something that I feel like is going to be a lot more sought after, especially with what I was just saying with smaller teams, stuff like that. You got to fill more roles, all that stuff. But I would say, figure out if you want to get into game audio, or if you want to get into animation, tech animation, like rigging. Like, do you want to get into programming? Do you want to do gameplay programming, or do you want to do back end? Just like figure out what activates your sort of your drive for wanting to get into games. Just try and figure that out first, and then go from there. Because there's so much that you could do within the space that, like, I would just take some time. Like, I'd say take a while to really just kind of look at all the different positions within game development, and really try to figure out like what brings you the most joy within that, right, and try to go from there. Yeah.
Cool. Anybody else got questions?
Nope.
No. KP, it was a pleasure, dude. Before we get out of here, usually at the end of every podcast, we ask what we've been doing this week, what we've been playing, that type of thing. So I'll let you go last. Cheetah.
This week has been a lot of Tekken, because I've just been practicing getting back into it. I have a duos tournament here after the podcast, so gonna go practice immediately after this. But other than that, I mean, it's just playing a bunch of Tekken, playing my gacha games, and reading manga. I haven't been watching anime lately, but because of that, I've been taking time just to read, and it's been fun. Like, I'm getting caught up to, like, I'm on the last chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen because that ended recently. I'm getting caught up on Kaiju number 8, and I started reading My Dress Up Darling because I didn't want to wait for another season.
Cool. Chris?
I just finished reading Mickey 7, since the movie's getting ready to come out. I think either end of this year or next year.
What is that?
But yeah, it was a really good book.
It was a book.
Super fast. It's about this guy who like signs up to be what's called an expendable, and basically you just get brought back, does all the dangerous jobs, dies, and then gets brought back from like the last checkpoint, and it kind of follows like how does that fit in to a new colony on a new planet, and just kind of like there's some like a little bit of mystery going on. It's really funny actually, but yeah, recommended. I
reminds
think
me
the,
of,
the new movie that's coming out has what's his name? The guy that played Edward in Twilight, Robert Pattinson. Robert Pattinson. Yeah. So it should be good.
I actually saw
reminds me of a
actually
movie
saw,
called Edge of Tomorrow.
oh, Edge of Tomorrow. It's
Yeah, kind of. This
Kind
one's
of,
more
but
more like body horror stuff.
it's actually
you know, like yeah,
clones and stuff.
yeah.
Like
Gotcha.
I saw the trailer not too long ago, and the trailer was actually really funny, but it's also like at least the way that the trailer made it seem is just like Christian said, he signed up to just be an expendable, and he gets cloned every time he dies. He doesn't like come back, he just becomes a clone with his
that
memories and
movie.
stuff. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
then
so
towards the end of the trailer, more of him are surviving, and so he's just like
Yeah.
in a room with like 8 of himself.
yeah. So
Gotcha.
it kind of explores like,
That's
you know,
pretty
what makes you at what point.
Does it stop being you?
Yeah. It's fascinating.
Yeah. It looks really good.
Quantum.
I'm watching Star Trek Voyager, and
Hey.
then brushing up on some calculus and a few other things on Brilliant and Khan Academy or Cone Academy. Can't even
It's Con, I
Con.
think.
Yeah.
Khan Academy.
Where I went for
Um,
my college studies.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then looking into the 5.5 updates for Unreal. So that's been my week.
Gotcha.
Nice.
I had a pretty light week, just playing Destiny, chilling for the most part. We had a Friendsgiving yesterday, just me and
Nice.
some college friends.
I see.
Yes, pretty. What you gotta say, dog?
I'm just saying, you said you was playing Destiny, so I'm gonna say it
Oh
every
my
time, but
God.
you should get help.
Yeah, get help.
Well, let me know when Call of Duty is good again.
Yep.
No, that's the problem. Call of Duty's always been good. It's the community that ruins it.
That is true.
That's fair.
That is true.
Call of
All
Duty is probably the best it's ever been, but you're gonna go into a lobby full of people that don't have jobs and are a bunch of streamers, content creators that are ruining the game for everyone else.
Well, that's a fair point. KP.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Call of Duty because I was playing Call of Duty. Since, I like it's funny because I hadn't played in a while. And I just jumped into the new one, playing some zombies and stuff like that. It is good. Like
Yeah.
it's fun. It's just such a solid. It's a solid shooter.
Yeah.
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 But aside from that, just been playing a couple other different games. I've been playing what was that? Windblown, which is like this roguelike that is made by the same creators as Dead Cells.
Okay.
Hey.
Um,
Okay.
Let's see.
Oh, yeah, I heard of that one.
Yeah. And then I was playing this other one called Karate Survivor, which is another roguelike, and it's like it's pretty cool. Instead of it being just firing off a bunch of different like bullets and stuff like that, you get these like different karate moves, right? So it's like you get like a roundhouse or like a low kick or something like that. But you get like 6 slots, and you get to slot these actions or attacks into like a combo. And that's the whole thing, is like you're just going through, and like you'll automatically attack after a certain amount of time. So yeah, that one's been real cool. But yeah, aside from that, just been working on Defect and just chilling.
Stick.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, KP, it was a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Hey,
sir.
thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
All right. Well,
If there's
thanks.
nothing else.
Thanks for listening another week. We hope to see you next week.
All right. Peace out.
Cool. Peace.